So this video is about how useful it can be to use EFT or emotional freedom techniques to help children and teenagers with all sorts of issues, and how that can help whether we're working with children as a professional or whether as a parent it can be a great way of empowering your children and teenagers and being able to feel less stressed yourself when they're going through challenges. So first of all, I'm going to begin by saying a tiny bit about EFT, and then I'll look at some of the issues that I think it's particularly good at helping with, and then right at the end, so if you hang around right to the end, I'm just going to give a few examples of how I might use it with children or young people. So EFT is a way of energetically releasing stress hormones that cause us to perform less well, that cause us to feel anxious, that cause us to make sometimes really bad decisions, and most importantly, that cause us to really judge and feel really bad about ourselves, that there's something wrong with us. So what it involves is first of all to narrow down what the problem is, if you can, and give it so it might be, in a child's case, it might be they hate maths, they hate their maths teacher, or they just convinced they're really, really bad at maths. So when they think of maths, their whole body reacts. They might have a churning stomach, they might have tightness in their chest. Those are typical ways in which we react when we're stressed. And of course, when we're stressed, we function less well. In a way, like when we're stressed, our brain goes offline because it's designed to do that. It's designed to do that because if we were running away from a tiger, we wouldn't need our brain to figure out, what the tiger's strategy was. We would just have to take action. But of course, in a school situation or in most of our life situations, there isn't a real tiger other than the tiger in our heads. So that when all our energy, all our blood circulation goes away from our head, goes into our extremities, so we can either run off or hide or fight, whatever we are designed to do, we're just not very, very good at thinking straight. So in the child's case, if they haven't got their mental focus, they're actually going to perform less well. They're going to not be able to concentrate. They're not giving themselves a fair chance of even beginning to perform better. So EFT has been research has been done on it that shows that it does reduce those stress hormones. And what it looks like in practice is, first of all, naming the issue. So let's take the maths lesson. You can tell what lesson I wasn't that keen on at school, can't you? And that was maths. So we could start by naming it, even though my stomach churns when I think of doing maths, or when I never get my algebra equations right, whatever it is. So we first of all, let's backtrack a bit. We first of all would say how strong that feeling is, and then we would measuring on a scale, in our own personal scale of 0 to 10, whereabouts on that scale it would be. We'd start off by naming it, tapping on the side of the hand, and we're naming the negative, which to some people can feel like you are focusing on the negative. What you're doing actually, you are focusing on the problem that you want to address the tapping to. So even though I hate maths, I'm a great kid, or I deep down I'm okay. So some acceptance phrase at the end. So you would say that 3 times, and then you would take a small chunk of that and tap on these remaining points. Well, you might say this fear of maths or this churning in my stomach, and so this point is just down from it's under my arm. It's about a palm's width down from my arm. So as you can see, it looks weird, but it can be really, really effective. So just look at so the idea, of course, is that then we reduce the stress. And it's not just a case of just doing one round, just a simple chunk like that, although sometimes that can be very beneficial. It's more about sticking with it, finding out what's really, really going on, until we feel in a much better place. And when we feel in a much better place, we can begin to introduce something more positive, like, okay, even though I've always been bad at maths, maybe I can, maybe I'm open, maybe I could be open to how, how much easier I could allow it to be if I relax, whatever. Or even though I've always been bad at maths, maybe there's room for improvement. I mean, after all, it's reported that Einstein, I believe, wasn't very good at maths, and he didn't do too badly at all, did he? So there's always room for change, but when we're stressed out, we don't see that potential. So that's just a small example of what the tapping would look like. And on a child, we could either do it on them directly if they were very young, or we might just tap alongside them. And not saying that we would encourage our young people to do it in public, in a place where they're going to be looked at and be made to feel even more self-conscious. That wouldn't work, but they can use it as a way of like debriefing in the evening, use it surreptitiously really in situations where they don't feel very comfortable. So let's look at some of the situations that I think it's particularly helpful for. So at school, for example, well, we've got a number of stresses. We've got the subjects that some children might find difficult. Some children might find certain teachers have got a manner about them that makes them feel anxious. Some children might have friends issues, that they feel that they don't have enough friends, or that they're the one that doesn't get picked. Equally, they could also be bullied and be picked on and feel really, really intimidated for all sorts of reasons. They're too fat, they're too thin, they're too bright, they're too stupid, they've got the wrong colour of hair. A bully is going to find some weakness in a child that they can pick on and kind of manipulate so that they can be powerful. So that when we do EFT to help with those situations, it's not directly going to change the outer world, but it's going to make that child feel better, so they're more able to cope. So they're more able, they've got more of their faculties on board, they've got more choices, and most importantly, they feel better about themselves. So for example, in a bullying situation, bullies, I would say, typically pick on children who look like easy prey, that they are anxious or timid, or they're different in some way, and the more awkward the child can appear, that the more that a bully might single them out. So if we were then to tap with a child on that, then they could begin to feel, first of all, release some of the trauma that they felt. They could feel stronger in themselves, and in that way they could not be more aware of things that they themselves could do, whether it's talking about it, finding somebody they trust to tell, avoiding situations maybe where the bully might be around, or simply having a different energy which doesn't attract that sort of behaviour. And in no way am I condoning bullying. I think that obviously it's a really intimidating, mean, horrible thing for a child to experience. And I suppose equally we might say that you could even use it for bullies who are acting out, and what's going on with them that's making them feel that they have to be mean to other kids. So it can help in all sorts of ways, and it can also help in that it can also be done content free. So your child doesn't have to say everything that's going on. They could just measure it, and sometimes a child might measure it, it's this little or it's that, so you can't see my hands, but really, really wide, and kids will sometimes say it's that big and round the back twice or whatever. So they can measure it in that way, and you can teach your children how to do it so they're able to do it themselves. So other situations that, of course, our children encounter when they're at school can be performance around sports, and whether they are, good at sports or bad at sports, and whether they hate doing sports and are always messing up, and so it can help with the stress of that. So it's probably not going to make somebody who's completely unsporty into an Olympic athlete, but it gives you more scope, it gives you more choices, and certainly it has been used for sports performance, because in sports performance, the more focused we are, the more confident we are, the better coordination we have on a bodily level, and the better we're going to perform. So that's another area that's really, really beneficial. And there can be stuff going on at home as well, stuff around brothers and sisters, or around, maybe they lose a pet, maybe a granny dies or something like that. So it can be so helpful for so many different areas. And if we look at working with teenagers, again, many of the same issues that I've just mentioned would apply to teenagers, but obviously thrown into the mix, you've got those dreadful teenage hormones that definitely make you feel less rational. So EFT can be very good at helping us cope more with those sorts of emotions. It can also help cope with us adapting to the changes that are happening, that are happening inside a teenager's body. So they might be comparing themselves with what they look like compared to a friend, how they look like as they develop sexually, how they feel maybe when they start to feel attracted to a girl or a boy that they like, and all that brings up about self-worth. Stuff like feeling dreadful because you've got acne, because your hormones are churning away. And I think these days teenagers are under, I would say, even more pressure than I was when I was growing up, because we've got the influence of social media, and teenagers we're talking about now, feeling that they have to look a certain way or behave a certain way. So even though they might be obviously wanting to be different to their parents, to find their unique self and to be more individual and to sort of claim their right to grow up and be a young man or a young woman, they might also be trying to conform to a particular shape or size or look a particular way. And generally when when they try to do that, they inevitably end up feeling there's something wrong with them, they're not good enough. And so I think EFT can be a really good way of them coping with that, all that mix of things. So and it's a tool that they have that they can do privately, they can do themselves, and if you were helping them with it, they can actually do content free, so they don't have to say what's actually going on. I suppose another thing that happens inevitably, or not inevitably, but often to teenagers, they might want to experiment with different activities or different substances, and then or feel pressure to do that, and all the conflictual emotions that go with that. And I suppose a final thing that's just come into my mind is then all the pressure for, exams, and this time bigger exams, and being told that your whole future depends on making the right choice. And then how you feel about being able to deliver that information on the day that it's expected of you. And obviously, again, we're talking about when we're stressed, our brain goes offline, so we are going to find it more difficult to revise. We're going to find it more difficult to remember. We're going to start panicking, and when you panic, then you've lost it, really. So I think that it can be highly beneficial, and certainly there have been studies that have shown that academic performance can improve when you do tapping in the classroom. And obviously it's not just about academic performance, is it? It's about feeling good about you, because we're all different and we're all here to do different things. And I think EFT can help you feel just generally better about yourself, feeling that you're good enough, and to invite yourself to find a way that expresses your own uniqueness. So let's take a teenage example then. Well, I suppose a teenage example, it might be about being the wrong shape. So it could be something like, even though I'm too fat or I'm too thin, deep down I'm okay. Or even though I'm too fat or too thin or too ginger or too blonde or whatever, I'm still a wonderful girl, or I'm still a wonderful young man. Whatever is going to feel like affirming for them, and so they started off measuring it, and they feel absolutely gutted about been a few pounds overweight, for example, and maybe they're already starting to change the way they eat because they're frightened of food, and there's a lot of anxiety. And obviously, if you're stressed out when you're eating, you're gonna be more likely to absorb the food less well. You're more likely to put on weight. So it's a kind of vicious circle. So even though, let's say I'm too fat, yeah, even though even though I'm too fat, or even though I'm not pretty enough, I'm still a wonderful young woman, and it might be difficult to say I'm a wonderful young woman, because obviously if you're judging yourself like that, you don't feel like a wonderful young woman. So it might be enough just to say, even though I'm not pretty enough, or I'm okay. Even though I'm not pretty enough, I can accept myself. Even though I'm not pretty, I don't feel pretty enough. My mum still loves me, or my dad still loves me, or my family still loves me. Something that is like just an acceptance. So we made that statement, and we said it 3 times, or excuse me if I've said it more than 3 times. And then we can tap around these points about how we feel about being us. And what we might come across a feeling of like sadness in the chest. When we think about that, we might come across a churning in the stomach. We might feel that we're kind of tightness in the shoulders, as we're kind of trying to make ourselves smaller in some way. So when we tap, it really kind of help change the charge on that, so we have more choices. It can also really get to the root of what's happening to us, so of why we feel that way. So perhaps we feel that way because the boy we fancied walked straight past us and just had eyes for our best friend, and we decided it was because there was something wrong with us, not because he genuinely just felt more attracted to your friend. You just feel that, hey, there must something wrong with me, and all the conclusions that we can come to based on that. Okay, he chose my best friend and he walked straight past me. That means I'm not pretty. That means no boy will ever fancy me. That means that I must really starve myself to lose, like that half stone, and it just becomes such a vicious cycle where you just generally just end up feeling more and more anxious, and really miss out on what could be some of the best years of your life if you knew how to let go of that charge, how to really appreciate yourself more, and how to acknowledge all the unique gifts that you have as that young person. And so I hope this is helpful. Maybe it's given you a bit of a taster of how it might help you if you're a parent or a professional. Maybe if you're a teenager and watching this, you might want to give it a go on how you feel. The important thing is to be persistent with it and to let what comes up, acknowledge that and tap on that, and persist with it and go with it, and feel things changing. So you start off with acknowledging what is not working, because that's the reality of the situation. That's how it feels to you. When that charge has gone down, say if it starts out at an 8 out of 10, you want it to be at least a 5 out of 10, or a bit, preferably a bit lower, before you begin to introduce that maybe there's a different choice. Maybe the past doesn't have to be the present. The past doesn't have to be the future. And you can bring in this idea of maybe there's a different way of responding. Maybe there's a way in which I could find ways of enjoying maths or appreciate my beautiful changing body as I grow into a young woman. And obviously we have to take baby steps, because you're not going to go from having a full-blown 10 out of a 10 reaction to it not being a problem at all. But you can be surprised at how fast that can unravel, because you are not just talking your way through a problem, you're working on the underlying energies. So you might want to check out my website if you'd like, and my website is maggiepashley.com. And I'll put it down below this video. I do work with people either face to face if they're in Sligo. I do also do most of my sessions via Zoom or phone, and I do teach workshops in EFT. I mean, in the moment I'm just changing my web page, but hopefully by the time you get to see this, it will say exactly when my next workshop is. And if that interests you, or you just want to have a session, or you want to find out more, then do get in touch. And you can also book a 15-minute free consultation with me over Zoom if you want, using the link below too. So thanks very much for watching. Bye.